Welcome to Compass Points, the weekly podcast for CompassKnox.com. CompassKnox.com is your best source for news and politics in Knoxville and Knox County. Your hosts today are Scott Barker and Jesse Mayshark, the founders of CompassKnox.com. You can find their daily in-depth coverage and subscribe at CompassKnox.com. The Compass Point podcast is brought to you in conjunction with Almost an Agreement. Almost an Agreement is a layman's attempt to get a handle on the workings in government and politics that we deal with every day. Check them out at almostanagreement.com or subscribe for free on your favorite podcast provider. If you'd like to learn more about the topics discussed on today's podcast, go to CompassKnox.com and subscribe for in-depth coverage and much more. And now, here are your hosts, Scott and Jesse from CompassKnox.com.
Hello and welcome back again to Compass Points, the weekly podcast where we talk about Knoxville government, politics, education, business, news, anything that gets our attention. I'm Jesse Mayshark, co-publisher and co-founder of Compass, which you can find at CompassKnox.com. Joined, as always, by Scott Barker, also co-publisher and co-founder of Compass. How are you doing on this Friday morning, Scott?
Doing well. I feel like I'm a Capitol Hill reporter after all the shenanigans that we've been covering remotely that are going on in Nashville. But
that is, it's that time of year where we have to pay a lot of attention to what's coming out of the state legislature. And the last couple weeks, as you say, even more than usual, because as we talked about last week, lots of people have been paying attention to the Tennessee state legislature. So we will, of course, be talking about the legislature today. In fact, most of the things we're going to be talking about intersect with the legislature one way or another. We also have an interview coming up with Matt Shears, the newly re-elected chair of the Knox County Democratic Party. He was just named to another 2-year term there. Some people might remember we had on Buddy Burkhart, the new chair of the Knox County Republican Party, about a month ago. So now we're having on his counterpart, and it will not surprise you that Matt Shears has some thoughts about everything we've been seeing over the last few weeks. Other issues in the legislature we're going to be hitting on, besides all of the turmoil around the Tennessee 3 and the aftermath of the horrible shootings at the Covenant School in Nashville. We'll give an update on a school voucher bill that is moving through the legislature. We will talk a little bit about the Knoxville city election bill that is also still active there. But to start out, before we turn our gaze all the way over to Nashville, let's just start by looking across the river. South Knoxville, there was an interesting discussion about South High at Planning Commission this week, which kind of connects with some other shifts that we're seeing in senior housing. Why don't you tell us about that, Scott?
Yeah, the shifts in senior housing are primarily circling around Rick Dover, who's a developer who kind of specializes in renovating. Basically, he specializes in renovating schools and turning into senior housing. He's got other things going on, but he was the developer and owner of South High, which is now an assisted living facility, a full service assisted living facility, and he has decided to sell it, and he approached the McNabb Center, and the McNabb Center was getting ready to expand Center Point, which is a residential addiction treatment facility that they have in West Knoxville, and instead of expanding that, they decided to buy South High, and what they had to get it rezoned, and so they had to go to the Planning Commission to get it rezoned. People who live in the neighborhood are not real happy about that. They first of all, the main complaint that they have is that South High is adjacent to Dogwood Elementary School, which is still an elementary school where kids go to school and everything. And there's a community center there too. And there were a lot of concerns that a drug treatment facility was inappropriate next to a school, in a residential neighborhood, those kinds of things. There is no there are no restrictions on where they can go. I mean, they can go in neighborhoods, they can go next to schools.
But the zoning has to allow for it.
The zoning has to allow for it, so that's what they did. And basically, they really needed the zoning to do that. The current zoning does not allow for a drug treatment center. The other issue is you have we have a housing crisis, and there aren't many places for seniors to go, especially seniors who need assistance in doing the day-to-day tasks of life, and and people that work there, people that are residents there, there's a lot of concern about them. But the interesting thing is that all this is it's more than your average dispute over zoning. It's not. There's no discussion about traffic.
Right.
No discussion about runoff or anything like that. That's usually what you hear. Anyway, there's a lot of discussion at the Planning Commission. And one of the things that they try to avoid is looking at what when rezoning a property, what a specific the specific project the developer has in mind. They look at all potential uses, and there are a lot more than just drug rehab that they could use in this the new zoning. But much of the discussion fell on the treatment end of it. It's the patients who go there voluntarily. They're not ordered by a court. There's two types of treatment there. There's the short-term detox, 7-10 days, something like that, and then there's kind of the longer-term residential 30-day treatment option there. There's no coming and going. It's not like a methadone clinic where people go there once a day and leave or anything like that. It's an inpatient treatment facility, and one of this is one of the things I think that helps sway some of the planning commissioners is that this will allow McNabb to treat twice as many people in residential setting than they do now, and and
obviously, while we do have a housing crisis, as you say, we also have a drug crisis, and there are a lot of people in need of treatment.
Yeah, was it 2021? More than 500 overdose deaths in Knox County. So
an all-time record.
An all-time record, and it's been growing year after year after year, and so the substance abuse. It's basically you had two crises, in which would be the best use for this property. So, and one of the interesting things too is a couple of the planning commissioners shared, that their families had gone through addiction, and almost every family in the county.
Knows somebody,
if it's not somebody in your family, you know somebody, or somebody in your family knows someone, or something like that. So it's been the planning commissioners did vote to approve it. But that's not, they don't have the last say. The reason now goes to city council, and they will pick it up. I think the first meeting in May is when it's scheduled at this point, and they will take it up, and the political winds might be blowing the other way by then. You don't know.
Right, and the actual staff recommendation from the planning staff was against it, right?
Yeah. The planning staff, the commissioners overrode the staff's recommendation. So theirs was to deny the zoning change. They didn't think it was compatible with the rest of the neighborhood. One of the things that Ben Mullins, who's the attorney who represented McNabb at the planning commission meeting, said was, he made the point that, hey, it was the new zoning was going to be civic and industrial, or not industrial, civic and institutional use. He said, well, that's exactly what the school is.
Right, it was originally.
And it originally had that zoning before they turned it into an assisted living facility. So I don't think that was, that was as big a concern of the commissioners as, just trying to figure out what the best use for that property would be. One negative for the city and the county is that and it's a very minor one, but the property was granted a payment in lieu of tax agreement, and so they make annually payments they go to the city and the county that are less than what the property taxes would be, but it's a payment more than it was bringing in before because it used to be publicly owned, and it's about it's close to $1,000 total between the city and the county.
Not much.
Not much, but that will if it all goes through, McNabb does end up buying it. Then that goes away, and
because they're a nonprofit,
they
won't pay property taxes. Yeah,
they're a nonprofit. They're gonna file for tax exempt status for the property, and they won't pay property taxes on it. But it's a minuscule amount in the grand scheme of things.
Right. Well, and so the other part of this is that Dover, well, as you say, he's done this multiple times, fixing up old rundown schools and turning them into senior living. So the first one was Oakwood in North Knoxville, and then historic Knoxville High and South High. Historic Knoxville High, separately from the South High deal, he has changed from senior housing to being just kind of wide open housing and is renting across all age ranges. And he had to get approval from the county industrial development board for that, because he also had a pilot on that deal, and in the actual agreement it said that it was going to be senior housing.
Yeah, that goes back to when he was first going to be renovating that, and he was putting the financing together. He was going to use low-income housing credits, federal tax credits, to help with as one of the funding pieces. So, in order to do that, it had to be senior housing, and it had to be the 62 and over had to be included. So he put that language in. That fell through. He wasn't able to get it, and so then they move on. They did market the facility to seniors.
Yeah, very much. When it opened, it was 100% senior housing.
Yeah, and there's a key difference between it and South High. South High is an assisted living facility. Knoxville High is just a regular apartment. It's regular living. It's independent apartments, kind of with convenient for seniors, but they're just regular apartments. Every apartment has a kitchen. It's there's all kinds of things there, and one of they ended up kind of running into some problems because they did provide meals, they did provide cleaning service. They did that for everyone. They charged a little bit higher rent, but that was available to everyone, whether they got the meals or not. They were paying for them, and one of the interesting things that wound up happening was that people, because they were receiving meals and have meals delivered to their apartments. There were people whose health deteriorated to the point where they should have gone to an assisted living facility, which has to be licensed by the state, and yet they were able to avoid going to assisted living because they were able to get meals and cleaning services and that sort of thing. And so it got to the point where, as Dover told me last week, we were essentially running an unlicensed assisted living facility, and didn't want to get in trouble, so they cut out the food service. The cleaning service is now optional. They cut down on the rent. They reduced the rents, but they also along the way started renting to people who were younger than 62. Now, I don't know how much younger, but they were younger than 62. I doubt that's there are a whole lot of UT students, for example, who would want to live there. Although there may be some, you never know. Anyway, and then what happened was they got there's a federal audit of the routine audit of their operations, and they stumbled across that language in the pilot that said you have to, this is for people 62 and older, and they were told that you're opening yourself up to a lawsuit. And so what Dover decided to do was he would go to the Industrial Development Board, get them to strike that language out of the pilot, and so that's what he did. They complied last week. One of the things that was interesting is now they can market to anyone. In fact, the website has no mention.
Yeah, they are already marketing to it.
Well,
if you look at it,
no mention of seniors. I mean, it's just kind of wide open. But Dover did say that they were still going to do that, to primarily look at seniors, because he likes seniors as tenants, and
but they're not committed to that.
But they're
legally
not,
or in any other way.
No, they're not. And one of the things that kind of came out through this was in talking with him was, don't be surprised if someone buys Knoxville High soon. Mm-hmm. He was telling me that his kind of the way he generally operates is he gets a property, develops the property, manages the property for a few years, and then sells it. Usually 7 to 10 years, and that's usually his window. And that played out with South High. It played out with Oakwood. He sold his interest in it. He's doing the same thing with the Hyatt place. It's not sold yet, but he's basically selling his interest in the Hyatt place to a hotel developer. The old Farragut building downtown. Yeah, the old Farragut hotel building. So I mean, don't be surprised if they announce that the Knoxville High gets sold. And also, if they do that, don't be surprised if the new owner doesn't do senior housing at all. One of the things about the senior housing, it's actually makes it pretty easy to convert the building, is that the leases they don't have leases. They rent these apartments month to month because they're seniors and their health can deteriorate, whatever, and
they need to move someplace else in a short period
without being encumbered by a lease.
Right.
And likewise, whoever the owner of the building isn't handcuffed by the lease either. They can just say, okay, starting next month, you have to sign a lease, or move out,
and the rent's going up, or whatever,
Right. But anyway, so that's probably down the road. Although there's no, Dover said that he gets offers weekly on that property. So he hasn't taken any of them yet, but don't be surprised if it happens.
Well, and one thing that I think is worth mentioning here is that because I've seen some discussion online about sort of are the city and the county getting what they agreed to when they gave the tax incentives to these projects. And I think, that's a sort of project by project question in terms of what was the goal of the project. But I think, and having been at the city at the time that the South High project, for example, was started, the primary goal for our local governments in these situations is usually to get the properties off of the public, out of public ownership onto private tax rolls. Although, as you say, with McNabb buying it, it won't really be on the tax rolls anymore. But more significantly, it's to redevelop the properties and make them usable and kind of return them to active use. And all of those are historic buildings. The South High building, Knoxville High, Oakwood, these are all historic buildings that local historic preservationists were very attached to, that people in the neighborhoods are attached to the building being there. They don't want those buildings to fall down. And in the case of South High in particular, it was right on the edge of being salvageable by the time it got redeveloped. So in those cases, I would say the interest of the local governments was not so much what the specific end use was as just like renovate the building and then get it returned to use. And I think that's what you saw with Knox County, with Knoxville High, saying, we don't really care if it's senior housing. Our goal was to get this deteriorating building, back into good use and be restored and fixed up so it'll last another 100 years and so forth.
One of the things that the Industrial Development Board did was they went back and looked at the initial RFP for that, and one of the things that was striking is there were a range of possible uses, of which senior housing was just one. And so, and that was obviously, and then talked to the county's chief financial officer, Chris Caldwell, about it, and he said, yes, I mean, the goal was to get, take a blighted property and put it to beneficial use. And, the what it's used for didn't matter at the time to the county. The county just wanted it reused. Now, other pilots are different, right? Like you said, it's specific to each project. But in both of those, or all three of the ones we mentioned, or actually all four, because that was the same with Hyatt Place. Yeah. All four of those, the goal was to put these blighted properties back to beneficial use.
Right. Exactly. Okay. Well, now let's turn our attention to the legislature. We only have probably another couple of weeks to talk about the legislature because I think they're in kind of a hurry to get out of session. So the remaining things on their agendas are at the point where they are either moving toward resolution or they're getting pushed to the side. One bill that we have talked about before is this proposal that would change the way the city of Knoxville runs its district elections. And so, first of all, you found out something interesting about that bill this week, but then also that bill did not, in fact, go anywhere this week.
Yeah, the bill is, we've talked about this before, the city elections currently for district city council reps. The primary is district only, where you vote for whoever is representing your district in the primary. General election, all voters citywide vote. So everybody's vote is it can be overridden by the city at large. It happens from time to time. Anyway, this bill would take away the exemption in state law that allows that.
And it would say that both the primary and the general have to be held only within the district.
Right. Yeah, that would be the result of it. Its language is a little more legalese than that, but of course, but it would mean that Knoxville would have to change the way the voting goes. One of the arguments that the proponents have made is that it would open up the city to being sued under the Voting Rights Act.
You mean the current system would?
The current system would, because in the 6th district, which is a majority-minority district, there's the possibility that the first place finisher in the primary, who would be the the choice of that district. In the general election, the rest of the city could override that, and it's actually happened.
Right. But specifically, the concern is that you could have a black candidate finish first in the primary and then lose to a white candidate in the general. That's where the racial tension would come in.
Yeah, and now the elections have been this way since 1969, and since 1970 or 1981, which is as far back as I could go without spending way too much time in the library, since then, it's happened 3 times in the 6th district. All candidates, or not all candidates, but all the representatives of the 6th district have been African Americans. The 3 times it happened were in the 90s, or 89 to 97, and then the same person was involved, Bill Powell. He finished second in the primary the first 2 times he ran. And won citywide. The 3rd time, he finished first in the primary and then lost to Danny Mayfield citywide. Mm-hmm. But since
and in all of those cases, both of the candidates were black.
Both were black, and in especially the first 2 times that Powell came in second in the primary, pretty narrow margins. He was really close. But since 1997, it has not happened.
In the 6th district. It's happened in other districts.
It has, but in the 6th district, specifically, the other districts don't matter as far as the Voting Rights Act goes.
Right.
So, it has happens a lot in the 3rd district, almost every time. But, it's not a majority minority district, so Voting Rights Act doesn't apply. But in the 6th district, in fact, the last 2 elections, Gwen McKenzie finished first in the primaries in both elections. She's African American, and she ran against the second place finisher both times was white, and she ran. So it was a black candidate preferred by the district and a white candidate who came in second in the district, who wasn't the first choice, and they ran citywide, and lo and behold, McKenzie won.
Right.
So I mean, so there was no, and one of the things is with the way that the courts have decided you've got to look at whether this is legal or not is whether it's happened. There's a test, a 3-part test that they have, but basically, if it hasn't happened, you're not going to, nobody can sue you.
Right. Not just does it have the potential to have an adverse racial effect, but has it had an adverse racial effect?
And it has to be over multiple elections. For example, the 1990s, you could make that argument. After the third time, you could make that argument. Although, I doubt nobody did. Nobody's raised it. I mean, people talked about it from time to time.
Well, and again, you didn't have a racial differentiation there, so you wouldn't have had that particular complaint.
And anyway, so that's one of the reasons that the initial sponsor in the Senate, Richard Briggs of Knoxville, decided that he wasn't going to stop the bill from going through. He originally carried it, had concerns about it, tabled it essentially, and then Elaine Davis, who's the House sponsor from Knoxville, shopped around some of her colleagues in the Senate, found Frank Nicely, who lives just outside of Knox County and in Strawberry Plains, and he picked up the bill. Briggs didn't stop him; he could have, but he didn't. And then, but Briggs, that is his big concern about the bill. Well,
the Voting Rights Act.
The Voting Rights Act potential is his big thing. The bill was supposed to come up last Thursday. And nicely requested a delay. Then it was supposed to come up this past Thursday, and the the committee it was on the House floor and Senate floor, and they were going through the agenda, and it was that really heavy agenda, as all of them are at the end of the session, and they didn't get to it, so they rolled it over to Monday, so it'll be heard Monday, and Briggs has offered an amendment to the bill, and it would delay the implementation to basically the end of the year, but that would mean it wouldn't affect this year's election. It would, and it would give the city time before the next election in 2025 to amend the charter, which is where the election process is laid out. So they would have to amend the charter and get that done. So he's amended that. I think that the amendment will probably make it, and because really, there's one race this year that will be affected by it. It's not the 6th district; it's the 5th district, which is Northwest Knoxville. There is no Voting Rights Act concern there, and not only that, but so far the incumbent Charlie Thomas is unopposed.
doesn't even have.
So it doesn't matter. So,
But so Briggs's amendment would basically say this will take effect, and it would have its first real impact in the 2025 elections,
right?
Unless the city takes its own actions to basically resolve the problem,
right?
And I guess basically make the same change, presumably.
Yeah. Well, they would have to. The city would have a blank slate,
right?
As you always do when you open up a charter for a charter change. They could do exactly what this bill would do, which would just be force the basically make the election commission's job a little easier or harder. I don't know which at the general election, but the city could do whatever it wanted. I mean, it could have no districts. It could have 11 districts. It could have. I mean, they could do anything you want, but presumably the easiest, quickest thing to do would just be to make the general election primary only or district only.
So if the city were to do a charter amendment, that would be on the ballot in 2024.
Right.
And either way, whether Briggs's amendment passes or not, it sounds like the bill is likely to pass. So probably we are looking at changes to the city district elections in one form or another.
Yes.
All right. Well, another change that we may be looking at, thanks to the legislature, has to do with school vouchers. And we have talked about this before. There is a bill that has already passed the state Senate that expanded the state's pilot school voucher program from just Davidson and Shelby counties. Right now, this year is the first year it's been available there, but it's only available to parents of students in the Nashville and Memphis school systems. The Senate version would expand it to Hamilton County, Chattanooga, and then there is a House version that came out of the House Education Administration Committee this week, headed for the House floor, seems very likely to pass in the House, that would also add Knox County. And there was some, debate and questions about it in the Education Administration Committee. Knoxville Representative Sam McKenzie, Democrat, had a lot of questions and was basically saying this was, the program operating in Nashville and Memphis was set up as a 3-year pilot under the state law, and why don't we just let it run for 3 years and see what the actual impacts of it are before we expand it anywhere else. However, that concern was overridden by the Republicans on the committee, and so it did pass out of committee. Assuming it passes on the House floor, because it'll be a different version than the Senate version, which just has Hamilton County in it, they will have to go to reconciliation. And it is a bit unclear what would happen there. Richard Briggs, once again, likely a factor. He has not been in favor of vouchers, and he reiterated that in an interview with the website Chalkbeat here just a couple of weeks ago. And so, the sponsor in the House said that the reason he was adding Knox County into the bill was that it had been requested by Knox County representatives, which is true. All 5 Republican legislators from Knox County signed on as co-sponsors and asked for the county to be added. However, if it gets then to the reconciliation point and the local representatives for Knox County in the Senate, which would be Briggs, Becky Massey, and Lieutenant Governor Randy McNally, if they or some combination of them are not in favor of it, it would somewhat push against that idea that, we're only expanding it to places that have, quote unquote, asked for it. I don't know how that ends up getting resolved. And so whether or not, we're kind of on the precipice here of a potentially really major, significant change in public education in Knox County and having school vouchers available possibly as soon as this fall, but maybe not. So we just have to see how that actually gets resolved, assuming it passes on the House floor, and then what gets reconciled.
Yeah, and I don't know how much, the average family in Knox County, is really, is dying to use a voucher to go to a different school. I mean, that's just, you don't know. One of the things that would be interesting from the initial pilot program in Shelby and Davidson counties would be the number of people who, or the percentage of the people who use the vouchers, took their kids out of public schools, or their kids were already in private schools,
right,
and they just use this to help reduce the tab for themselves.
Right now they can't do that. The law was specifically written because there was so much resistance to this law when it was first passed in 2019. The pilot program is set up that it's only available to parents who either already have a kid enrolled in public school and then are taking them out, or if they haven't started school yet. Yeah. So if your kid isn't in school and they're going to start in kindergarten, the voucher would be available to you. Okay. But under the way it's written right now, if you have a kid in private school, you can't just say, I want one of those vouchers to help me pay the tuition I'm already paying. However, there definitely was a lot of discussion in the Education Administration Committee indicating that several of the Republicans on the committee at least felt like some of these limits that had been put in place in the pilot, including that one, that you had to currently be enrolled in public school, also the income limits, because right now it's only available to families making up to double the federal free lunch guideline, basically. Which works out to be about $78,000 household income for a family of four. And there were already people on the committee saying, maybe we should raise that and make it available to more families. Maybe it should be available to people who already have their kids in private schools. So I think that and this, of course, was very much predicted by opponents of vouchers when it was first introduced, because it was introduced in this kind of very limited form. The opponents said, well, this is just to kind of get in the door, and the real goal here is to have universal vouchers available to everyone, everywhere, to just kind of get that check and do whatever they want with it. Either pay private school tuition, pay for homeschooling costs. There's a lot of different sort of models you could imagine there. And there were at least some people on the committee, including Representative Brian Ritchie, a Republican from Maryville, who he actually had an amendment to just make it available statewide. Let's get out of just these 4 counties. If we really want to run a pilot program and see the impact, let's put it in all 95 counties and see what happens. He didn't actually push that. He could kind of see that there wasn't support for that right now. But I think that kind of, assuming that this happens and it expands to Hamilton and maybe to Knox, and runs for 3 years, then I think you will start hearing, because we are already hearing it, more and more people saying, let's just make it available to everybody. Right now, it's capped at 5,000 students statewide. I think that one of the incentives for proponents of the program to expand it to other counties is they are, in their first year in Nashville and Memphis, they are nowhere near that 5,000 cap. As of February, they had, I think, about 650 families enrolled, and there were others who had applied and were being processed, but I think they want to fill that 5,000 limit. And the other thing to mention is that for the 3 years of the pilot program, the program includes funding to quote unquote make good with the local districts. So if you have a student enrolled in Knox County schools who gets withdrawn and goes to a private school or goes to homeschooling and their parents get that voucher, the state for those 3 years will hold Knox County harmless and say, you will still get your per pupil funding for that student. But that'll only last for 3 years, and then once that's over, the money goes with the student, and the school system would have fewer dollars because they would only have the students who are actually in their school. So anyway, we don't know whether this is going to apply to Knox County. We don't know if it'll be available this fall, but we're kind of at a tipping point here with the voucher issue, where after literal decades of people kind of talking about this and arguing about it and proponents fighting for it, it may actually be just about to come right here to Knox County. And we will, of course, report on the outcome of all of that. Okay, so the kind of big issue at the legislature this week continued to be the big issue that was at the legislature last week, and which we talked about last week. Of course, the whole fallout and reaction to the school shootings at the Covenant School in Nashville, which led to protests and demonstrations at the state capitol, including a short protest on the floor of the state house led by 3 Democratic representatives, our own Gloria Johnson. By our own, I just mean Knoxville. Well, she is actually my representative, but Knoxville Representative Gloria Johnson, and Nashville Representative Justin Jones, and Memphis Representative Justin Pearson. We don't need to tell you about them because they are national celebrities. They've been on every media outlet that I can think of, one or all of them. They actually began this past week with an appearance Monday morning on Good Morning America, flew back to Nashville for a rally that day. The Nashville Metro Council held a special called meeting Monday afternoon and reappointed Justin Jones to his seat on an interim basis. Shelby County Commission followed suit on Wednesday with a special called meeting, reappointed Justin Pearson on an interim basis to his seat. So they are both already back at work in the Capitol. They've been sworn in. They are again working members of... Jones actually didn't even miss a full day because he was expelled last Thursday. Then the next day was Good Friday. The legislature was out of session. He was sworn in late Monday afternoon and came back into the chamber to participate in discussion and votes. And so Pearson lost a couple of days, but that was it. So they are back. They will both still have to run in special elections in order to be reelected to the seats they were already elected to and then appointed to. And I think everybody assumes that they will probably win those easily. They may have people running against them in those. Of course, there's always, when a seat's up for election, you're always going to get somebody who's interested in it. But especially given that they have both raised hundreds of thousands of dollars apiece during the brief period that they were out of office and could fundraise. So they have huge campaign chests for those special elections and to use for other elections going forward. So that all happened. Governor Bill Lee, after not saying really anything about the expulsion issue, did come out this week and propose some modest changes to Tennessee gun regulations. He issued an executive order essentially setting a close, I think a 72-hour deadline for any kind of new criminal conviction to be entered into the state's background check system to make sure that somebody can't get, convicted of a crime on Monday and then go buy a gun on Thursday because it hasn't shown up in the background check system yet. He can do that himself as an executive order, somewhat more ambitiously, although not ambitious by the scope of what I think a lot of gun regulation proponents would want. Is he also called on the legislature to pass a bill that would allow expanded orders of protection. He did not call this a red flag law. A red flag law is a law that allows somebody who's concerned about somebody's mental health to petition a court and say, I think this person is a danger and they should have their guns removed. They shouldn't be allowed to buy guns. What Lee's talking about is kind of similar to that, but he didn't use the words red flag law because a lot of Second Amendment supporters, enthusiasts are suspicious of red flag laws. They think that it's going to lead to lots of people getting their guns taken away just because they got in an argument with somebody at a bar or whatever. Right. But even not using the phrase red flag law, he was calling for orders of protection that would be kind of the same thing, where somebody could come in and say, I think this person is a threat to themselves, I think they're a threat to me, I think they're a threat to the community, they should not have access to firearms, and a judge, could have due process and weigh in on that. But even at that somewhat reduced level, there has been a notable lack of enthusiasm in the Republican leadership of the legislature to take that up.
Yeah, it's such a for years the Republican leadership has pushed bills expanding gun access to guns, and so it's this is while gun control advocates would say it's pretty modest step, is a complete 180.
Right.
And
it is actually tightening up a little bit on something that, as you say, they've just been opening up wider and wider.
Yeah, and the Tennessee Firearms Association is already rallying the troops to oppose this. I think that the Republicans are caught a little bit between a rock and a hard place in that there is a lot of sentiment among the general population in the wake of the Covenant school shooting to do something.
Yeah, and of course we've had subsequent, not in Tennessee, but we just had a shooting in Louisville this week, and it's kind of like this continual cascade of shootings.
And one of the reasons is, first of all, it's a religious school, and one of the victims was a friend of the governor's family.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think that you can't dismiss that connection right there, and so I think that there's that. But then on the other hand, these are legislators who have made their careers on expanding gun rights.
Yeah,
every single one of them, and they get funding for that. A lot of, especially in rural areas, gun control is really is a non-starter for in almost every rural county in Tennessee. So it's a big stretch to think that they would embrace this. Now it could pass. It would pass reluctantly on the part of many, in part because of the school shooting, and in part because of the negative attention that the whole that led to surrounding the Tennessee 3 protest, and I think that is really that's. I don't know if it's going to have an effect on them, but it may.
Well, it doesn't appear to at the moment. I think there basically is no active bill right now under consideration that would enact this. And I think the last bill that could have been used to do it has died. And it does, and we are at the end of the session, and so the likelihood of now they did pass a package of new school safety measures and funding for those, including armed security officers for schools that don't already have them or can't afford them. Of course, every school in Knox County already has that. In many cases, they have multiple ones. They have a school employee who is an armed guard, as well as an officer from either the sheriff's office or the Knoxville Police Department. Also, some funding for school locks and safe windows and these kinds of things. They did pass those, but I think the likelihood of any kind of gun restriction passing in this legislative session seems essentially zero. And one thing that I thought was interesting that came out this week was this recording that leaked on Thursday of a meeting of the House Republican Caucus, I think this past Monday, I believe, where, and it was a private meeting of the caucus, just the Republican members. Not everybody was there, but a lot of them were apparently. And this was, we should say, this was put out by the Tennessee Holler, which is a progressive media outlet. This had a lot of scoops, actually, in recent months. They also were the ones who publicized Bill Lee's high school yearbook drag photo. They were the ones who publicized Lieutenant Governor Randy McNally's Instagram liking habits. So Justin Canoe, who runs the Tennessee Holler, has been on quite a roll here. Also worth mentioning, his own home got shot up. And he filed a police report about that. They don't know who did it, but obviously some concerns there. But this recording from the caucus was very telling in that I thought it showed the mindset of, yes, they did hear all of the blowback and pushback that came from expelling Jones and Pearson, and came from just the appearance of hundreds and thousands of people, sort of demonstrating, asking for action on gun laws and not receiving it. But what that recording showed was that I don't think that they were too concerned. There was no sense in there of, oh no, we'd better hurry up and pass some gun restrictions, for example. That didn't come up at all, at least in the snippets of the recording that got released. And these were edited snippets. We have to say we haven't heard the whole recording. I don't know if anybody has heard the whole recording. So they were obviously selected by the Tennessee Holler or whoever put it together to kind of highlight the things they wanted to highlight. But the impression among the Republican members appeared to be that the main reason that they were being made to look bad and that they were being accused of racism, among other things, was not that they had expelled Jones and Pearson, but that they had not expelled Gloria Johnson, and a lot of the anger, of course, there were a lot of kind of harsh things said about Democrats in this closed meeting,
surely not in a meeting of Republicans,
including by Representative Jason Zachary of Farragut, who just said point blank, the Democrats are not our friends. We can't have any illusions about this. They are out there calling us racists. He was very offended at the idea that he said he'd never been called a racist in his life. And that this was, kind of outrageous that they would be out there saying this, and that it was going to be very hard for him to have any kind of warm feelings toward Democrats. Of course, Democrats themselves may say, well, we're not feeling a lot of warm feelings anyway. You literally just expelled 8% of our entire caucus.
And to be honest, I mean, the Democratic caucus, when they get together, I'm sure they don't have very nice things to say about the Republicans.
You think? Well, I mean, I talked to...
that was not a surprise.
Yeah. I talked to Representative Sam McKenzie, Democratic representative from Knoxville, on the record about his reaction to to that recording. And he was not very complimentary of the Republicans or of Jason Zachary specifically. He said he needed anger management classes. But the interesting thing was their focus was really internal, and they were mostly mad, it seemed, at the small number of representatives who had voted to expel Jones and Pearson and not voted to expel Gloria Johnson. And one of those representatives was in this meeting, and you had Zachary, House Majority Leader William Lamberth, Representative Scott Sapicki, just kind of laying into Representative Jody Barrett, and kind of blaming him, saying, you're the one who made us look racist by if you had just expelled Gloria, we wouldn't be dealing with all of this. I'm not sure that is an accurate assessment of how that would have gone. I do think that if the vote had been to expel all three, maybe that specific perception and accusation of racism wouldn't have been as heightened. But my guess is you probably still would have had a lot of people saying that this was, it was racist. Maybe they would have been accused of sexism as well on top of it.
Well, one of the things that it would have done is people would probably still have accused them of being racist. But it wouldn't, I mean, when in the current situation, it's almost like, can you argue against it? I mean, what can you say?
Yeah.
If they had expelled Johnson as well, they could say, well, no, we expelled Johnson too. She's white. We expelled all three of them for the protest. But it's harder to defend it when it is, regardless of whether it's true or not. It's harder to defend it.
Absolutely.
When in actuality you only expelled African American legislators.
Well, it kind of goes to what you were talking about earlier with the Voting Rights Act, where one of the tests in the Voting Rights Act is what's the actual effect. And in this case, whatever any individual representative wants to say about their votes, the effect was
Yes.
they expelled 2 black guys and they didn't expel. They almost expelled the white
did,
woman,
yeah, it was
but they
really
did
close.
not. They did not actually expel her. And Sam McKenzie, when I talked to him, he said that in the course of those expulsion hearings, as they progressed, because first they expelled Jones,
Right.
then they had the vote on Gloria Johnson and did not expel her. And at that point, McKenzie said he and some other Democrats went to Republican leaders and said, if you do what it looks like you're about to do, which is go ahead and expel Justin Pearson, you are going to put yourself and the entire state in the position of looking racist. That's how this is going to be perceived. We would really suggest that you not expel Justin Pearson. And of course, they wanted them to also unexpelled Justin Jones. But McKenzie basically said, we really did try to tell them that this was not a good idea and was not going to look good for them. And they went ahead and did it anyway. And so he said, first of all, I never called anybody racist. But secondly, they're the ones who created the optics. And we tried to warn them about it and they did it anyway. And so he was kind of saying, it's,
Run it on yourselves.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, and also, he had some thoughts about whether there was going to be any long-term impact from this on the operation of the House itself. Because one of the big issues here, the real motivation for that initial protest on the House floor was the Democratic representatives feeling like they did not have a voice. They didn't have a way to participate. They were being shut out by the Republican leadership. They were not being recognized to speak from the floor. They were having their mics cut. They were being gavelled down. And so, one question coming out of all of this was, well, given all of the focus on that, would there be any change? And just this past Thursday morning, right before I talked to McKenzie, they had a bill come up having to do with the divisive concepts law that we've talked about before, adding some new regulations and restrictions on what colleges can teach and also kind of how they have to report on the outcome of any complaints they get. And McKenzie said that the bill was clearly going to pass. It was on the House floor. It had Republican support, but Democrats were objecting to it and wanted to talk about it and got shut down and weren't allowed to have the full debate on it. And, McKenzie said, they're going to win the vote anyway. It would have cost them only time to actually allow the Democrats to speak. But he was kind of saying that, no, nothing's going to change. They're just going back to the same things we were complaining about before. And if anything, it sounds like from that Republican caucus tape, the tensions in the chamber, which were already pretty high when it came to partisan divisions, are probably even higher now.
Yeah, it did nothing to make it easier to get any bipartisan support for anything. I mean, it's just the polarization is pretty much total, and it doesn't look like there's anybody who is really interested in moving in a different direction.
Yeah, well, they're presumably going to get through this session over the next week or two, and then it'll be interesting to see when they come back. By the time they come back next January, whether any of this has settled down a little bit, or if heading into yet another election year, as we will be in 2024, all of this just gets sort of heightened and amplified. We will see. However, to get a little bit more perspective on all of this and what it means, we are going to bring in another local interested party. Matt Shears is the chair of the Knox County Democratic Party, and we talked to him about all of this and also kind of about his big picture thoughts of the position of the Democratic Party in Knox County, which our listeners will not be surprised to hear. He is very optimistic, he says, about the future of the Democratic Party in Knox County. So let's go ahead and go to this interview. All right, joining us this week for the podcast interview is Matt Shears, the newly re-elected chair of the Knox County Democratic Party. On April Fool's Day, he was named to a second two-year term by party members. So, Matt, welcome. We had your Republican counterpart, Buddy Burkhart, here a couple of weeks ago, so we thought it'd be a good time to have you on. And I was wondering if you could just kind of start by introducing yourself a little bit to people who may not be familiar with your background. Who are you? What do you do? And kind of what drew you into local politics here?
Yeah, sure thing. Well, first of all, I want to say thanks for having me on. And I enjoyed the episode with Buddy as well, too. Buddy and I didn't know each other before he was reelected, but I did get to know him, and he's a very nice guy, very friendly. Well, yeah, I am Matt Shears. I am 29 years old and originally from a small town, a tobacco farming town in North Carolina called Stokesdale. And my family there has essentially lived in that small town for about 6 or 7 generations. And every generation of my family as well, too, has been members of the Democratic Party since the founding of the Democratic Party back with Andrew Jackson and things like that. So I'm a 7th generation Democrat, originally from a small rural town in North Carolina. I have lived here in Knoxville for about 12 years with I guess 11 years here. I'm married to the lovely Lauren Serber Shears, and we have one son, Henry, who's a 1.5-year-old. I actually work in finance, so I work for a pension fund that specifically serves a mainline Protestant denomination, so Christian Church Disciples of Christ, the Red Chalice folks. So I work in the financial world, but also kind of in the religious nonprofit world as well, too. A little bit about me. I actually have a divinity degree, so I went to seminary and have a Master of Divinity, and that's kind of connects with my own political trajectory as well, too. Ever since I was a kid, like 2 things that I've always been fascinated by are religion and politics, and the good, the bad, and the ugly that can come from both of those being mixed together. And so I did my final project in seminary on political theology. Essentially, I focused on the 2009-2010 Affordable Health Care Act debate and discussed the religious influences on both sides of the debate during that time. So, I grew up around politics. My great grandma had a picture of FDR in her house. We were big FDR Southern Democrats. I've always been involved in like student government. I was student body president in elementary school, middle school, high school, and college. And when I was in high school too, I got really involved in school board politics where I was from. And then when I moved to Knoxville, I just kind of reached out and got involved in the local party and have been working at it ever since. I was originally vice chair under LaKenya Middlebrook, and when she went to go work for Mayor Kincannon, I became chair, and then I was elected to a full term in 2001, and then just re-elected to another full term on April Fool's Day. So, yep, that's a little bit about me.
2021, I think you mean. You said 2001, but just
whoops, 2021, yeah, not 2001. Side note about 2001 though. One of my first political memories is we had kids voting at Stokesdale Elementary School, and I was going classroom to classroom canvassing for Al Gore. And although Al Gore did not carry North Carolina or win the presidency, he did carry my elementary school. So
it's funny. I actually had a somewhat similar experience. My earliest political engagement was in 6th grade. I'm older than you, and so this was in the 1980 presidential election. But we had a debate, and I debated on behalf of Jimmy Carter because my parents were Carter supporters. And same deal. Carter lost the election, but he won my classroom. So I felt like I had some impact there. Well,
there you go.
Let's jump right in. I want to ask you some questions about sort of the big picture of the Knox County Democratic Party, but we've had very eventful couple of weeks here. Obviously, the horrible shooting at Covenant School in Nashville, followed by the protests including the protest on the floor of the state house that then led to the expulsion hearings last week, and then to the reappointment vote this week. It's been a crazy time. Our own Knoxville Representative Gloria Johnson, one of the two Democrats, obviously, in our local delegation, has become kind of a national figure alongside the two Justins, as everybody's calling them. So can you give us a little, there's been a ton, obviously, written and said about all of this. From the standpoint of the Tennessee and Knox County Democratic Party, I guess, what's your read on this, and specifically on the politics of the expulsion votes and kind of everything that's come since then?
Yeah. Well, first of all, just like Gloria and Justin have been doing, I first want to focus on what the impetus for all of this was, and that was the tragic gun violence and the death of 6 people, 3 of them children, in Nashville. And we've all been very particular to make sure that doesn't get lost in the discussion of this, the heart of this and what has happened goes back to that incident, and the need for reasonable gun regulation in the state of Tennessee. And that being said, I also think that this whole scenario, and the kind of the expulsion and the blowback and the national attention, I think it's a microcosm of the larger issues at play in Tennessee, where you have a state legislature and a state government that relies on the economic powerhouses of our major cities, but then essentially attacks the political views and the policy goals of those cities. And I don't think it was, I'll say, I thought it was a bit telling that all 3 of them were from the 3 largest metro areas. And so, as in general, you have people who are calling for reasonable gun control, both in cities and suburban areas and in rural areas. But you have a state legislature that is just absolutely closing its ears to any sort of discussion about that. And so the political dynamics, I think, tell a story in multiple different ways. I'll also add that on the local level, I can say that we really didn't expect this big of a blowback, and I don't think the 3 of them either did either. That being said, we're grateful that there has been a magnifying glass placed on Tennessee, and particularly the Tennessee legislature. Something that Sam and Gloria and others have told me about too is that the situation in the state legislature is also more than just these expulsions. The expulsions were another microcosm of just how Cameron Sexton and the Republican supermajority operates, where they cut off the mics of Democrats. They don't let Democrats pass bills. They will steal Democratic bills, and just a pretty blatant disrespect to the Democratic Party, which primarily represents the metro areas. And in addition to that, you have this shines a light on the gerrymandered nature of our state legislature as well. So you have a supermajority, which I think has somewhere between 75 to 76% of the seats. But statewide, I think that the last state legislative race, they maybe had 60 to 63% of the vote. So you have a chunk of people who are just not being represented. So yeah, I mean, I could keep going. Really, I'll stop just to see if you want me to elaborate on anything.
Well, you said that everybody is surprised by the amount of attention that this has gained. What do you think accounts for that? Why has this incident resonated across the country?
The expulsion of the 3 representatives, to me, demonstrates a huge overreach by the Republican supermajority. And I think that huge overreach by the Republican supermajority is also indicative of the authoritarian stream within the modern Republican Party. This is not the Republican Party of Howard Baker. This is not the Republican Party of Bill Haslam. This is a Republican Party that has become much more authoritarian. And here in Tennessee, you have a supermajority that is not used to seeing any substantial pushback. I mean, obviously, the Democratic Caucus has tried to push back against the supermajority. Certain elements of the media have shown certain lights on the supermajority, but you have not had a national pushback on the supermajority. And in my opinion, you have a number of the Republican supermajority leaders who act in a brazen disregard to Democratic small d norms, and a blatant disregard to any sort of accountability. And I am grateful that the magnifying glass has come here, because I think it resonates with a lot of people, because it shows just what the Republican Party on the national level has become. And what it has become is the worst elements of what we've seen here in the Tennessee legislature.
Well, so one question I asked Gloria Johnson when I talked to her this week was, obviously there's a lot of attention and a lot of energy right now.
Yes.
But presumably coming from your side of the aisle, that's something that you would like to find ways to sustain and build on, both for issues around guns, but kind of around your agendas more broadly. So is that, and a lot of, people have asked me over the past week, does this mean anything? Is anything going to change because of this? As a party, as an institution at the local level and the state level, what do you think this means? Is this a real inflection point, as people say, or is this something that we're all going to kind of move on from in a month?
There will be no policy change or substantial change until there is electoral consequences for the Republican Party. We can have as many marches as we want. We can have as many people show up to the state capitol or show up downtown as we want, but there will not be any substantial change until there are electoral consequences. From our perspective as the Knox County Democratic Party, we can't control what happens on the state level. We can't control what happens in Chattanooga or Madison or Johnson City, where there are places where I think we can have gains. But what we can control are the places here in Knox County that we feel, or not that we feel, that we know we can make gains. And over the last 2 weeks, the Knox County Democratic Party has raised $20,000. I have had hundreds of emails of people who want to volunteer or run for office. In my time as chair, I have seldom seen the amount of energy that we have in the last 2 weeks. And what I'm telling our people is I'm reminding them of that it is good to be excited. It is good to have that energy. But if we do not channel that into electoral strength, then nothing will change. And I feel confident that we will have a full slate of candidates next cycle. I think that they will be passionate candidates, and I feel confident that we are going to have a number of seats that we have the potential to flip and to see continued movement in. And that's what we're focused on. We want to channel that energy, those volunteers, and that anger into recruiting candidates, into building up the party infrastructure, into knocking doors, into making calls, into fundraising, so that we can see electoral consequences for this Republican overreach, not only in the state House, but the state Senate, and in county commission and in county offices as well, too. Sam McKenzie, a couple days ago, he tweeted out that he had a message for people who were mad, and he said, "Stay mad." And then he also said that what we need people to stand up and run for office. So that's what we're focused on. I feel confident, like I said, that we'll have a full slate of candidates, qualified candidates, and that's what we've been working on for the last couple of years as well, too. And that's been a priority of mine, is to make sure that we have as full a slate of candidates as possible. And that doesn't mean we're going to win every race. It doesn't mean we're going to have a clean sweep. But it does mean that we're going to represent our values and our voters, and we're going to keep pushing until eventually these seats do flip.
Well, that kind of sounds like you would have been trying to recruit candidates and raise money and knock on doors anyway, I'm sure.
Yes.
So does the injection of funding and the energy is basically just a jump start on what you already have been doing?
Yes. Yeah, we were already. I was already making donor calls. I was already talking to people about running for office. But the energy that has been pushed in because of this situation has been reinvigorating to those efforts. There are people that I have been asking to run for office for years now who would make good candidates, and they say, no, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. But then I've had calls from some of those people this week who said, you know what, I think you're right. I think that I need to run for office. And so it's pushing people to be more involved, to run for office, to donate. And yeah, I think that the other thing is I've seen, and I've even had conversations about outside investment in Tennessee. One of the reasons that we have seen such great Democratic strength in Georgia over the last number of years is, one, because of the demographic shifts, but two, because there's been a focus from the national party, the DNC, and other groups and movements to invest in the state of Georgia. And that is something that has been totally lacking in Tennessee. We have definitely gotten the shaft in the sense of national investment into our state. But this has shown a light onto Tennessee, and there's a lot of conversations happening on the state level, on the national level, and that's coming down even into the local level of people saying we want to invest in the party infrastructure in Tennessee. We even at Knox County Democratic Party, we've had donors from like 10 or 15 different states this week, and these aren't people we reached out to. They just found us. I guess they Googled us or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, and of course, people can't donate directly to Gloria Johnson right now because she is still in office. I guess the county party maybe is the closest place that people have found. Well, can you give us a little bit of your big picture read on the state of play in Knox County right now? We did some analysis after last year's elections that did suggest some movements. Of course, the Republican or the Democratic Party in Knox County has not won a countywide race, I think, since 2006, and that was kind of at the tail end of what I would call like the old Southern Democratic Party. And
that's when we almost had a supermajority in the House. That's a world away.
Right, exactly. And obviously, the party has now been locally reinvented to some degree within the broader national mold of kind of more urban, modern Democratic Party. How optimistic are you about, I guess next year's county and state races in particular are going to be your next proving ground? How do things look for Democrats in Knox County right now?
It is not a matter of if Knox County flips blue. It is a matter of when Knox County flips blue. I'm not going to say that's going to be next cycle or even the cycle after that. But it will be within the next 10 years, and people can quote me on that. That is because of the suburban shift that you have seen nationally is happening here locally as well too. I think that's why Kat won her seat. Her seat was almost entirely suburban. And
Kat Bike in the 4th District School Board race.
Correct. Yes. And even with Stuart Hall, who ran in District 3, he was 89 votes away from winning. That also was a suburban district. When you look at Debbie and how Debbie did against Glenn Jacobs, Debbie Helsley running for county mayor, you also saw that suburban shift. So it's the I-40 corridor. The future of the Democratic Party in Knox County is the I-40 corridor. You have places like, and it's I always tell people it's like we're traveling down exit by exit. Sequoia Hills used to be red. Sequoia Hills voted for Mitt Romney, and then most recently voted for Joe Biden, I think 60%. So you have Sequoia Hills, that used to be red, now it's blue. Bearden used to be red, now it's blue. West Hills used to be red, and some people say, oh, it's purple. But if you look at West Hills, I don't think is going back. West Hills is going to become a blue precinct. And so now we're at the Cedar Bluff exit. What is that? Exit 380? I don't know. We're at exit 380 Cedar Bluff, and we are knocking on the door of Cedar Bluff.
378, I think, is Cedar Bluff.
Okay, 378. We're at exit 378. And Stewart was maybe 7 votes away from winning the Cedar Bluff precinct. That also is a precinct that voted pretty handily for Donald Trump in 2016. So yeah, the future of the Knox County Democratic Party is along the I-40 corridor. It's in the suburbs. It is suburban middle-class voters who may not even identify themselves as Democrats, but they are increasingly voting for Democrats. It's also a coalition of moderate Republicans. We have a number of moderate Republicans who have become part of the KCDP apparatus. You've got people like Cliff Rogers. You have a number of people who they still consider themselves Republicans, but they help us out a lot. And yeah, for the Knox County Democratic Party, we do not have to win every precinct. We've got the blue precincts in the city, the urban core. We have to maximize those. So we're winning like my neighborhood, Park Ridge. I think we win Park Ridge like 84% of the vote. I want us to win Park Ridge with 87% of the vote. And then you go in the suburbs, we're winning West Hills, but I want to win Cedar Bluff. And then I want to go all the way to Farragut and start turning those like AL lots. So Cat Bike won AL lots. We did not expect to win AL lots. That's actually where Will Edwards, her opponent, lives, and we still won AL lots. That is indicative of the suburban shift. So we need to flip those purple suburban areas. And then we're also organizing in rural areas. So we have people that are working in Corrington, in Halls, and Powell, and South Doyle. And in South Doyle, so the South Doyle precinct, I think we win maybe 27%. We're not gonna flip South Doyle precinct, but we want to get to 30% in South Doyle precinct. And so if we chip away in the rural areas, we flip the suburban areas, and we max out in the urban areas, that is our path to victory. I'm not going to say it's going to happen next cycle. It could happen next cycle, but it will happen eventually. I will say next cycle, there are a number of commission seats that I think are in play, particularly District 4, which overlaps with where Cat Bike won. I think District 9, which is South Knoxville, or South Knox County, where Annabelle Henley, I think, got 47% of the vote against Christy Christie. Those are 2 that are going to be in play, and those are ones that we're going to be investing in as well, too. And I think that people underestimate us at their own risk.
Scott, do you have any final questions or thoughts?
You mentioned that people who are Republicans have been helping you. Is that have you heard from a lot of people in the last week and a half or so since the protests in Nashville? Heard from any of them specifically recently who are maybe old school Howard Baker Republicans who are newly interested in helping the Democratic Party?
Definitely. I was looking through some of my emails last night, and a number of them started off by saying, I'm a Republican, but I have been a lifelong Republican. However, and I'm fine if people still want to identify as Republicans. We don't have party registration in Tennessee. And there was someone who reached out to me and said, I'm a Republican. I've only ever voted in Republican primaries, but I want to run. And I think I want to run as a Democrat. That's fine with me as well, too. We want to be a big tent party, and we are a much bigger tent party than the Republicans. And a number of my Republican friends, who I am friends with a number of Republicans, they're pretty upset about how all of this was handled. They think that Cameron Sexton really dropped the ball. They think that people like Jeremy Fison, William Lamberth, Andrew Farmer, oh my gosh, Andrew Farmer, he's really screwed himself. Maybe not electorally, but just check anytime he tweets something or posts something on Facebook, there's like 1,300 responses in 5 minutes. But yeah, there are a number of Republicans who've reached out in the last couple of days, and that suburban shift that I was talking about as well too. I don't think all of those people are Democrats. I think that they're independents. I think that they're Republicans who vote increasingly for Democrats. And that's fine with me. That's fine with us. It's fine with the party, because we're building a coalition. We're not building a litmus test.
All right. Well, that's probably a good place to leave it. Certainly, we will continue to be in touch with you as all of these things play out. And thanks again for joining us, Matt.
Yeah, for sure. And I just arrived home, so I am home off the road now. So thank you both. And appreciate Compass and what y'all do too.
Thanks again to Matt for talking with us, and I'm sure we will be talking with him a lot in the coming years. We've got some interesting elections coming up across the board.
Absolutely.
Looking ahead to this coming week, we have County Commission getting together for their monthly work session Monday at 5 p.m. in the main assembly room of the City County building. Not a super dramatic looking agenda, a couple of interesting items. One thing that's symbolic but interesting are a couple of resolutions that are being proposed by commissioners to support different elements of Governor Bill Lee's proposals that we just talked about. So a group of Republican commissioners has put forth a resolution basically just showing the support of County Commission for Lee's calls for enhanced security measures at schools. And then we have another resolution put forth by Commission's two Democrats, Chair Courtney Durrett and Commissioner Daisha Lundy, supporting Lee's call for expanded orders of protection when it comes to people's access to guns. So given what we've already seen at the legislature, which of those measures Republicans have supported and which they haven't, I think it's probably likely that we're going to see something similar on County Commission, where Republicans are comfortable with the enhancements to school security, maybe not so comfortable. This is a county commission that, among other things, voted to designate Knox County as a Second Amendment sanctuary county, or words to that effect. I don't remember the exact wording, but a couple of years ago. And so I will be kind of surprised if there are a majority of commissioners to support the gun restrictions through the expanded orders of protection. But we will see, and again, this is another example of these kinds of national and state issues coming down to votes in our local legislatures, which both commission and city council at different points have kind of engaged in these more symbolic ideological resolutions than anything they can actually control or take action on. And then City Council is meeting on Tuesday.
Yeah, their council's meeting Tuesday, 6 p.m. in the main assembly room in the City County building. This is a voting meeting, but the agenda's kind of light. One proposal that is out there comes from Councilwoman Amelia Parker, and this is something that she's complained about since she's been on City Council, and she wants to change, is the calendar of the budget approval, and basically the mayor will bring forth announce the budget, the state of the city address. Then not long after that, they'll have the first reading at council. Then they'll have a work session to public hearing to talk about the budget. Then they'll have second reading. So it all happens with the votes happen within 2 weeks.
And all that's spelled out, like you say, in the charter.
It is spelled out. What she is proposing to do is to put some more time on the back end, because the back end they could apparently make some moves out because there's a deadline for the budget to be approved, and so she says since there is a deadline and it's further out than what the schedule shows this year, give us some more time. We can have some more public hearings about this and get more input and have time to make possible amendments to the budget. Because right now, I mean, they vote on first reading. You go to these budget hearings, and you really don't have time. She's right about this. They really don't have a lot of time to put together any kind of alternative to.
Right. They can kind of ask specific questions about things, but there's not typically a step in there where then council just kind of talks among themselves about, do we like this budget? What do we not like? Is there anything we want to change? Like, they kind of don't engage in that discussion.
Right. Yeah. And so I think Parker would prefer that kind of give and take and that ability to make some substantive changes if warranted. I don't know. I think she's going to be able to get others to go along with this. I don't know if she'll get a majority, but it would give them an opportunity if they wanted to. Now, you got to be clear about this. Council members can't go in and make line item cuts. That's just not allowed. But they can look at the kind of departmental bottom line amounts, and they can look at those line items and say, well, there are $1 million worth of line items in the police budget that I don't like, so I want to cut the police budget by $1 million. What could or on the other side, what could the police do with an extra $1 million? And I want to add $1 million to that, and you can
take it from somewhere else.
And you take it from somewhere else and say, okay, well, we can cut, 100,000 here and 100,000 there, and and do all that. You'd actually have time to be able to do that, and we'll see. I would imagine that the administration would not support that. And Mayor Kincannon has a pretty solid majority on council, but we'll see. That's other than that, there's not a whole lot interesting on their agenda that at first blush,
right?
It just came out, so there might be there's always something that could flare up between the time the budget the agenda comes out and the time they actually sit down to meet.
Well, we will cover both of those for sure next week and talk about anything interesting that happens there. For now, I guess that wraps us up here. Thanks, as always, to Seth Barber, our producer at Barbarian Productions. Our theme music is by Will Wright, and we will see you next week.
Welcome to Compass Points, the weekly podcast for CompassKnox.com. CompassKnox.com is your best source for news and politics in Knoxville and Knox County. Your hosts today are Scott Barker and Jesse Mayshark, the founders of CompassKnox.com. You can find their daily in-depth coverage and subscribe at CompassKnox.com. The Compass Point podcast is brought to you in conjunction with Almost an Agreement. Almost an Agreement is a layman's attempt to get a handle on the workings in government and politics that we deal with every day. Check them out at almostanagreement.com or subscribe for free on your favorite podcast provider. If you'd like to learn more about the topics discussed on today's podcast, go to CompassKnox.com and subscribe for in-depth coverage and much more. And many thanks to William Wright for composing our theme song. Compass Points is a partnership of Barking Shark Media and Barbarian Productions, and recorded by Lord Seth A. Barber at Barbarian Studios, Knoxville, Tennessee.